Hey guys, so I know I recently provided a meta tier list for this month already, but I figured, you know what, Rage of the Abyss came into effect, we had YCS Niagara, and we did see some notable shifts in the meta, so I figured I might as well do an updated one, so hope you don't mind, basically using YCS Niagara topping information and some Dueling Book information as well. As always, definitely go check out those discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles as well as supplies, links in description down below. Also, as always, a shout out to YGOProduct.com as well as Ivan for keeping up with all of the meta topping decks. Anyways, let's just get with the tier list for this month post ROTA now, and we do have Snake Eye Azamina now taking the top space instead of Yubel. So of course they did have like an Omni Negate thrown on top of whatever they already had, so that's a nice little boost. But I think it's also sort of related with Yubel just coming down on its own because of Fuaros as well as Perlia just both going pretty hard against Yubel. So I think that people were probably a little bit cognizant of that heading into this event. You also have Tenpai Dragon. Speaking of those hand traps, a really nice addition for this deck, especially because they are going second, and those hand traps are obviously better for that. And not to mention Dominus Impulse is another new hand trap from ROTA, which goes really hard. It's a very strong card, and Tenpai Dragons are one of the decks that can play it because, you know what, for the most part, the attribute lock doesn't matter for them aside from Heraldic Seals, in the future turns, and that has definitely come up in YCS Niagara that I've seen even personally. I'm sure it will happen more, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, this deck is really strong. Indirectly got a beef with those hand traps that are now in their arsenal. So next we do have Yubel, which has fallen down a little bit so far. It is obviously still a very strong deck. If it goes first uninterrupted, incredibly strong, scary off just one Lotus, for example. But as I mentioned earlier, both Flawless and Perlia happen to be good against this deck because they're both summoning from hand and deck and extra deck, which, a lot of times some of the decks will at least like lose only to one, and for the other it doesn't affect them as much, but this one it kind of both affects them. So I think that's why it kind of dropped down. Who knows, to be seen as we move forward into this Rage of the Abyss format. It's still, as I mentioned, a really strong deck, so I'm curious to see what'll happen, and definitely let me know what your thoughts are when you get hit with either the Mulcharmies when you're playing Yubel. Shout out to my friend Brandon. He tried to take the Flawless challenge against me when I resolved Flawless. I had 18 cards in hand. I only had to put back 3 because that +6 makes no sense, and yeah, needless to say, I was able to win because I had a lot of cards. And then finally, we have Fire King, Snake Eye, Azamina, or whatever other Fire King variants. So this actually won the YCS, of course. Shout out to Landon. Now, at the same time, in terms of just overall tops, number of topping decks, the regular Snake Eye version with Azamina stuff, that definitely had more representation. But I think the Fire King stuff has always been really cool. It definitely provides some unique interactions that you don't see in the other Snake Eye decks, like the Kirin, like dodging, the pops. I think that's always kind of nice. I think usually people kind of play it away from the Fire King stuff at earlier times in this year, because they had some bricks that you'd have to play. But nonetheless, I think it is still kind of cool that Fire King has made a comeback now post Banless and post ROTA. So we're going to move straight to Rescue Ace, and if you've seen some of my videos in the past, I've always mentioned how it was surprising to me Rescue Ace would see such little play after being tier 1, with Aghav format, and then after that, once we enter Snake Eye format, it just really disappeared. But I always felt it was still a very strong deck. Back row interruptions and monster interruptions always just seemed really scary to me, and this actually did get some multiple tops at the YCS. Shout out to Matt and Imad, both from Canada actually. At the regional level event, this first weekend post ROTA, we did not see any tops, at least publicly known, but I'm sure there will be more people that will try this now that it's seen some YCS success. Definitely really strong and can't sleep on them. So next we have Centurion. So you've seen Pac do really well with this. Team Sam was doing pretty well with this as well at YCS Niagara, and Steven Santolius has also been on this deck. So those really good players piloting this deck, I think, really provides a sign that it has a lot of promise. I believe it was also partly because they don't play into like the Mulcharmies as hard as some of the other decks, and also Blazing Quasar Dragon is really strong. They don't have Calamity anymore, sure, but Quasar on its own, really sticky, really annoying to deal with, and also they typically seem to play with like the bestial stuff now. The regain has always been pretty busted, and you know what, when I actually paired against Steven Santoli myself against YCS at YCS Niagara, I had like Dark Ruler evenly. Turns out that's actually not that great against Centurion, so even without Calamities, so I think there's definitely some good promise there. So next we have Labrynth. This topped the YCS, actually had some regional success as well. With the ban list, they weren't hit directly. D-Barrier was still legal, and D-Barrier is actually very popular right now, which you're going to see in my YCS Niagara top cut breakdown video that I'll post very shortly. So I think Labrynth was in a good position. With ROTA though, Dominus Impulse definitely can be pretty devastating against Labrynth as well, like many decks of course, but you know what, it still showed promise and was able to compete. Then we have Ritual Beast. This is a deck that actually also topped the YCS. It can play Dimension Shifter, which is nice. Protos going first is also incredibly scary and very hard to deal with, realistically speaking. My understanding was coming into ROTA format, this deck might see less play just because of the Mulcharmies hitting this deck pretty hard as well. But a big shout out to Cecilia, also Canadian by the way, for topping the YCS with this. Super impressive, and I'm sure keeping the hopes alive. So we're just going to put a little bit more rogue decks in this section than usual, but because I want to start with Sky Striker, of course, which did finish second place with the one and only Ryan Yu. Incredible performance, but at the same time, let's be realistic, it's not a deck that's going to consistently do well and get a lot of tops. At least I don't think. He is an absolute legend in terms of piloting this deck, and not many people can do the same with it. That being said, definitely wanted to make a note of it. It topped the YCS. It's usually actually pretty popular online as well, so I think it definitely deserves a tier spot, as at least in the rogue section. It's a going second deck. He wasn't playing any Mulcharmies, just a lot of spell cards to just break boards, kind of like a resource intensive game essentially. So I think it's really cool that it was able to top even in this year. Speaking of another cool deck that topped is Exodia. So shout out to Oliver for topping the YCS with this deck. I actually played against this just before, like heading into Niagara, and I remember being almost kind of impressed actually, just the fact that it wasn't actually an absolute meme. It would like shifter you, like this big guy would just gain 8,000 and just one shot you. They have like a board wipe, and also on top of that they have Secret Village of the Spellcasters, which is kind of deadly. My opponent even just summoned left leg, slapped on Secret Village. I'm like, you know what, that might actually get a lot of decks out there. So I do think that it's really cool it was able to top, and hopefully we see some more regional success at least moving forward. Next, we have White Forest. Unfortunately, it did not top the YCS, but you know what? It was getting some pretty good success leading into this format before ROTA. At the regional level wise, it still got some tops here and there. D-Barrier is pretty popular right now, though. And again, you're going to see that in the YCS Niagara Top Cut video, which obviously they're a synchro-based strategy that is going to hurt them. In terms of Fualos, I would assume it would still affect them as well, as they go into the extra deck decent amount. So, you know what? To be seen. Definitely let me know what your thoughts are on how maybe it has changed for White Forest post-ROTA. So next we have Plant Link. I feel like at this point I still don't really know too well how to beat this deck and how to play against it, but kudos to Julius for topping yet again. I believe he made a tweet that he didn't even have the chance to practice that much post ROTA, but he was still able to do really well. He did unfortunately break both games in a row in Top Cut and kind of fell out there, but you know what, super impressive to top with this even now and really keeping that dream alive. So next we have Memento. So unfortunately it did not top the YCS either. It did get some regional tops though, and from my understanding, they don't actually play, at least the pure version, they don't actually play into full walls that hard as what I was told, which is kind of nice to have, I guess, in this current format. They can be pretty scary going first, I feel like, but though I think the main downside is they just absolutely died as shifter. I did do a survey of Memento players not that long ago, and they just said there are just no real alternate lines of play when you get hit with shifter, and that is still kind of a thing, especially when you see here Tenpai Dragon is pretty popular, and they're of course playing shifter at the very least in the side. And then you have Chimera. Also did not top the YCS unfortunately, but you know what, I think it is actually still quite good. I actually paired against this at YCS Niagara, and when they win the die roll, which unfortunately that player did, I find it's very hard to win against this set, because the Chimera will like rip one, maybe you play a hand trap, you basically hand loop yourself on another, Diabels forces you to set and they pop that. Like, you're really having a hard time going through that on top of whatever their actual board is, like a Caesar if they're playing like the Fiendsmith stuff, which they probably are, and then on top of that you have like the Chimera fusion plays to like pop more cards. So I think this deck is really good. So then you have Pearly. I'm not actually too familiar with how this deck is going to be post-ROTA. I mean, I do know that D-Barrier, as I mentioned, is pretty popular, and that actually stops X-Pearly Noir, which is kind of nice to have. Although, of course, unless they kind of spun it back before the end phase and anything. But nonetheless, if you play Pearly, I guess let me know how you feel with like all the moral charmies going around, how much it affects you. So next we have Runic Stun, and I'm actually surprised this deck did not top the YCS. I feel like the last few months at the very least, there's at least been one stun deck that's been constantly topping. It just provides a cheap way to combat in the current meta, especially now where the prices become even worse than it already was, with moral charmies being so expensive. Dominus Impulse has also been spiking. Perlia was not a cheap card either. So you know what, if you don't want to pay for all those cards, I mean, Runic Stun does provide a pretty nice cheap alternative to stay in the game. It's not fun to play against, but you know what, can you really blame people for playing this deck in a format where it's just very expensive to play? Then we have Branded Despia. This is obviously a deck that I've been running for about 20 months straight at this point. So You know, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I also don't want to be in denial either. I have to say it is a very rough spot for this deck because you have some new cards like Dominus Impulse, which is really strong against branded. On top of that, you have Fualos, which to be fair hits a lot of decks anyways. But because of Fualos, you know, people are playing, if they weren't already, more likely to play Ash even more than before, and that obviously hits branded really hard. So all of those things, I do find it makes it a little challenging. I was playing Fualos in my list at YCS Niagara with branded, but I was playing a very big 60 card list. I felt that card was kind of hit and miss in this deck because we can't play as many hand traps with a very high engine count in branded. So those are some things that I've learned in this format so far, but hopefully, you know, there has been one regional top at least, so you know what, maybe there is still hope for us. And then you have tier elements as well. It did get a regional top, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like both Multi-Army Fualos and Perlia would go pretty hard against tier elements, so I would assume it's maybe not the best time for tier elements. Again, let me know. I mean, they do summon from the hand a lot, right? Like Sharon, you have Rhino Heart normal summon, you have Kashira tier elements, and then they obviously go into the extra dark quite a lot as well. So, I mean, again, let me know if I'm wrong there. So finally, into the last tier, we have Dynamorphia. So this actually did top a regional recently. I did feature the profile with Ricardo, so definitely go check that out. You know what? It's a pretty unique deck. It like halves their life points. It's a very trap heavy strategy. You're gonna lose to them with like 13 life points left. It's going to be extra infuriating. It has like a walking Mystic Mind. It plays a lot of counter traps. You know what? Definitely quite the interesting experience anytime you go against Dynamorphia, and has been topping here and there at the regional level for the last year or so. Lastly, we have Salamangreat. This is actually day 2 at YCS Niagara as well, which you can also check the deck profile on my channel with Will. You can also definitely go check out his YouTube channel as well. It's all linked down there in that video. It also did top a regional as well. I'm trying to get that deck profile too. I'm not quite sure how Salamangreat is in this current format. I feel like they also play into Mulch-Armies pretty hard. Again, another one, if you do play the deck, definitely let me know. Up until this point, definitely Salamangreat has had pretty decent success, you know, realistically speaking, compared to what they were, you know, if you look back even like a year ago. So they've enjoyed some pretty good success with like all the indirect fire support. So hopefully they can still continue to be playable. Alright guys, so that was it for the meta tier list post ROTA. Hopefully you found that helpful in terms of helping you prepare for your upcoming events. I know it is a very expensive format, so hopefully you're still hanging in there. Anyways, a big thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my patrons and sponsors for the continued support as always, and well, take care guys.